All right, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. I'm Andrea Cumpston with the Enterprise Wireless Alliance, and you are joining us today for What's Ahead for CBRS. Our speakers today are Mark Crosby, EWA's President and CEO, and Chris Guttman McCabe with CGM Advisors, chiming in to help us understand all the regulatory issues we may encounter is EWA's Regulatory Counsel, Liz Sachs. We also have another cast of characters that Mark will introduce for us.
Thank you, Andrea. Good afternoon, everyone. In these crazy times, we're at the office. I think maybe I'll start once a day a week now, start working from home, if my cat will let me get my work done. It is sort of strange driving into work because traffic is about, oh my goodness, 10 to 15% of what it normally is. But thank you for all of you joining us, and I had a couple preliminary comments I wanted to make. A lot of people are holding webinars, and they're all good. We actually attended one last week. I didn't, but staff did, the IGR session down in Washington, D.C. Keller and Heckman has, I think, done one or two, and Wireless Infrastructure Association did a webinar as well, and experts, and those are all good. And but I thought, and we thought, that'd be good that EWA had a webinar on CBRS that we could tailor to EWA's constituents exclusively. You know, we've had a lot of input from members, a lot of interest expressed from members. They appreciate the relevance of this band to their businesses, whether they're a business enterprise or whether they're a service provider or whether they're a vendor. This is a major, I think, a major event for all of us and a lot of people in the industry. And so we thought we'd do our own webinar. We have a lot of data to cover. I apologize for that. So if we go a little bit too fast and furious through some of the data, remember that you can ask questions, and we're going to make to members available a slide deck for your review, and you can always ask us questions after the fact. I also want to share that EWA's volunteer leadership, principally the executive committee, we've had a lot of discussions on to what extent EWA will participate in CBRS, et cetera, and we made the following strategic decisions. What EWA does best is educate its members and provide them critical information so that they can make good business decisions and spectrum strategies, et cetera. The executive committee, in case there's rumors out there, EWA is not going to be part of a bidding entity, and we're not going to be part of a consortium. As we made the decision, we can't help our members, and we can't be a resource of information to our members if we're a competitor in this auction. So that was a very conscious decision we made. We're going to provide, and you'll see in this, we have some information that we think will be very helpful, but we've made that decision. We're not going to be at DE. That means we're going to have to, assuming the FCC keeps April 9 as the short form, we're going to be very helpful to a lot of people, but once that door closes on April 9 until the auction concludes, we're going to be run silent, run deep, and be quiet until post-auction. But that was a decision we made, and we think it was the right decision for EWA. You know, a long time ago, I learned that I don't need to know all the answers, but I need to know where to get the answers. And so joining us today, it doesn't get any better than this. We have Kyle Lentz. We got, how many years are you at Sprint? 20 years? 17. Robin, 17 years at Sprint, Nextel. Chris Guttman McCabe is, in my humble opinion, just one of the smartest and most knowledgeable policy people in Washington, D.C. And I'm very pleased that he's one of our panelists today. And of course, we have Liz Sachs.
And if you say nothing about how long I've been doing this, I won't say about how long you've been doing it.
Yeah, I know, Liz. All I know is that I think if you add all four of us up together, Liz, Robin, Kyle, Chris, we're probably over 100 easy. And I'll just say that you and I probably contributed the majority of that. But anyway, it's all good. But all of us have been in the trenches for a long time, so it's all good. So one last thing I wanted to share: this band is complicated, but it's a sign of things to come. This is a band that has, as you'll learn, why is it complicated? It's unlicensed. There's feds in it. There's an auction in it. There's a new SASs. There's people controlling where devices can go and on and off. But this is, I think, not the first time this is going to happen. So the commission and actually EWA and all, we need to get this right if you're going to play in it. So let's begin. I want to answer as many questions as we can. We have a lot of data. Panelists, please jump in as you see necessary. Let's have some fun. Just to keep us organized, we've sort of created the slide deck into 5 pieces. What's the band? What's its makeup? How do we get access to this band? I mean, what are the options? So if I do want to play in here, whether unlicensed or PAL or whatever, what's the equipment? What are the applications? And I'm going to turn part 3 over to Kyle. Part 4 is the auction participation. I mean, you'll see that this is not let's do a bidding unit at a time. And no, this is complicated, this auction. And then just to put the fear of God into everybody, we have a section on the anti-collusion rules. I will admit that most of this material was taken from Liz Sachs, but the presentation would not be as good as it could be if we did not at least cover some of the anti-collusion rules that everybody needs to be aware of. So part 1, the band is 3550 to 3700 meg, 150 meg total. The Citizens Band Radio Service was created in 2015, 5 years ago. There are 3 types of users in this band, called access, or there's tiers. There are incumbents, Navy, Department of Defense radars, 13 of them. You got to stay away from them. Obviously, you can't cause interference to Navy radars. Now, they're probably in places like San Diego. Help me if I'm wrong here, Kyle. San Diego and Chris in Norfolk and Jacksonville and Mobile and Boston and other places where U.S. warships and other things might be docking. But obviously we don't, they're the _1 priority user in this band. Radars is also in the top end commercial fixed satellite service receivers, and there's some grandfathered point to multi-point microwave systems. Next tier, priority access licenses, PALs. I guess that's a good acronym or whatever they've created, PALs. Let's all be PALs. Okay, so commission's going to auction. There's 7 10 megahertz blocks. They're going to auction 7 of them, and all of this is controlled by, we'll cover this a little bit greater details, spectrum access systems, and which actually are the key to this entire, to me, the key to the entire success of this band and future operations of the CBRS, because they control frequency assignments on a dynamic basis in seconds. And then, of course, just to make this band a lot of fun, there's unlicensed devices, probably consumer-based, things running around in this band. They can go anywhere in the band. Obviously, they're subject to SAS is keeping track of where they are, disciplining them if they get out of line, telling them where you can go and can't go and when. But those are general authorized access. So there's 3. Critical ones are the incumbents of the feds. Priority access, there's a little chart. So the tier 1 are the incumbents, naval radars, you'll see fixed satellite service and broadband wireless access providers that run from 3550 to 3700. The PALs, tier 2, I know it's 100 meg, but they're only going to do 7 auctions because the SAS will be moving people inside the entire tier 1 part of that spectrum, 3550 to 3650. And then you have the general authorized access that can operate, the devices can operate in the entire 150 meg, even the ones that are auctioned. So they're in the 80 megs, that are not auctioned, and then the 70 meg there also can operate under the direction and control of the SASs in the PALS licensed spectrum. Again, the key to this success of this band are the spectrum administrators, service administrators. These aren't people that filed, oh, I want to be one, and the commission goes, oh, okay, you can be one. No, these folks have invested substantial sums of money, private investment capital or whatever, to become certified by the FCC to operate as SASs in the CBRS. They're certified. And just to sort of say, I don't know what the investment is to become a SAS, but I suspect it's north of 30 to 50 million or more. And the activities of these are only going to get more complicated. I know. Well, we know most of these folks. They're all good, right? They're all professionals. They've all invested. They've all been certified. Just do your job, right? Control the band, the unlicensed GAAs, the PALs, and so there's CommScope, which is I don't know whether I know they're affiliated with CommSearch, and actually on the circuit, Mark Gibson, who's a friend of mine, who's with CommSearch, has been on some of the other webinars covering the activities of the SASs. Federated Wireless, incredible organization, what they've done, just like CommScope, they're up and operational. CommScope, I believe, is up and operational. Google, Sony are the other ones that have been certified, and we believe there will be several additional, Amdocs and Nokia. And yeah, I guess they're competing for each other in devices because everything has to be registered with the SASs, but they're all very capable, they're all professional, they're all certified by the FCC, and you really can't, the band won't function without them. Access options. So how do you get to this band? And this is, so you can be a secondary user. Again, the GAA operators, users operating both the unused and the unused portion of the band, the auction part of the band, and the unlicensed channels. Correct me if I'm wrong, Kyle and Robin. It doesn't matter. They got to stay away from the feds, right? Just you can't have any people walking around with their PCs and devices in Norfolk when the aircraft carriers come in.
And the SASs will fully control that.
And the SASs fully control that. But devices are available today, and Kyle will cover some of that information momentarily. How else do you get to this band? Well, you got to play in an auction, and you got to win. And that's how the PAL, you got to win in the auction. Some of you may recall that EWA, for a good period of time, Liz was participating in several industry coalitions, et cetera, to try to get the size of the auction geographies at a reasonable size to benefit EWA's members and manufacturers. For example, the petroleum company that has a refinery, I don't know, 50 square acres, something like that, in Houston, does not need to buy the state of Texas. So, and that type of scenario can happen in many ways. But we were advocating at one time the zip code sizes, and there was the other side of the industry saying, oh no, you need to do CMAs, cellular marketing areas, of which there's only 50. And of course that doesn't help EWA's members. It doesn't help EWA's private carrier operator members who want to provide CBRS type of services and Internet of Things and things to their customers, because I mean they're operating in say 2 or 3 counties, and if I'll pick Ohio, I'm not doing this all throughout the state of Ohio. So it's sort of, to us, was if you did really big areas, you virtually handed it to the national carriers, because they're the ones that, yeah, I'm going to buy the whole state. Our members don't need the whole state. So it sort of ended up, and if you look through all of the news and the people getting all upset about this, et cetera, we ended up in counties. And counties are still pretty big for some of us, some of our members, but it's a far cry and far better than cellular market areas or MEAs or states or whatever. Of course, the pain is there's about 3,500 counties in the United States and the territories, and there's 7 blocks of spectrum being auctioned. So when I said that this was going to be a complicated auction, I know Chris Guttman McCabe can add some commentary when he gets to his section.
Yeah.
There's 22,631 pieces of spectrum for sale. And I don't want to steal Chris's thunder. That's a lot.
Yeah.
That's a lot. And obviously you wouldn't go willy-nilly in there on this. You need to have a plan. And again, Chris will cover that. But this is sort of speaks to the complexity of this auction and making the spectrum available through auctions. And again, the PALs, if someone's participating to get access to this band through an auction, yes, there are 7 pieces of 10 megahertz available. One person may only win 4. So I guess that leaves 3 for others, but we're still anticipating it to be a competitive auction. So if you're in the PAL, you can win 4 counties. I mean, you can win 40 megs. The license term, if you win, is 10 years. Substantial service requirement to renew licenses in the 10 years. I don't know whether Liz has a good definition or Chris has a good definition. I don't think the commission's come up with a good definition of what the heck substantial service means. But they keep using it. Got to have substantial service. And every time somebody files something at the commission, here's my claim or my proof of substantial service, it's not always well received or accepted by the commission. I don't know. Liz, what do you think? I mean, do they got a definition for this band that's going to sustain scrutiny?
Well, I think it's a bit of a fluid concept. I agree with that. But yeah. I don't know that that's necessarily bad for us.
Right.
Yeah. Right. I'm just saying, I think, for this webinar, we got to say substantial service. And again, that's why we have Chris and Liz. You better have really good advisors. And when you're going to play this game. Now, of course, how else? If you're not a secondary user, you're not going to win any auction. I'm going to assume there'll be an opportunity to lease or acquire access to this band through secondary markets. Not quite sure whether that's mandatory that everybody has to play in the secondary markets. I think it's a myth when FCC says, "Oh, well, don't worry about it. You can get to secondary markets." And okay, and I haven't seen a lot of rural or suburban type of things made available through leasing or sales in some of the previous auctions. But maybe this is a different band. Maybe this is a different day. All right, so listen, I'm not going to go through all of this. There's a process, and know the dates. The commission issued the public notice. They adopted the procedures on March 2nd. Again, for those of you, I don't know if you're going to write that down. That's the link to the auction procedures. It's not 8 pages. It's not 18 pages. It's 80 pages. Virtually every page, relevant information. So those of you on the call go, yeah, I'm thinking of, if you haven't read it already, I recommend you read it soon, because there's a lot of data in it and how to play, and you can't make a mistake, right? You got to be on top of your game. If you're going to play, it's sort of like the card game. On April 9, you go, yep, I want to join the card game, and you fill up a form and you get a seat at the table. On May 21, you still want to play the cards. You got to say, I want this many chips, and here's my money. Upfront payment, but sort of defines the scope with which you will participate in the auction. And since you want to be able to use, one of the best things the FCC does is conduct an auction. It's having done it once, I mean, it is like very hard to fail. but it's good to do a test, like how you grab the chips and put them on the table, right? So there's a mock auction. It's sort of only for fun, but it sort of teaches you, and the commission gives you an opportunity. Yep, I can do this auction. And then 3 days later, that's when they're dealing out the cards, and it counts. And the bidding begins on June 25. If somebody were to ask the question, well, how long will it go? Who knows? Who knows? These auctions are designed for a lot of reasons. They're efficient. They're very efficient. And but remember, they're designed to get the spectrum in the hands, and this is the theory, gets in the hands of the people that put the spectrum to the highest use. You can believe that. That works sometimes, but it also is, auctions are designed to generate revenues for the federal government. You bid on unspecified blocks, and the SAS sort of controls which block you use from day to day once you win it. And you can ask the SAS to say, I want this block. Every single device in CBRS, probably not the feds, I'm not sure about the feds, but because they're sort of stationary and fixed. The GAA devices and the devices, mobile and fixed inside the PALs, every one must be registered with one SAS. And there are, at this point in time already, and Kyle will get into some of this detail, 60 devices already approved for use in Citizens Broadband Radio Service today. I repeat, every device deployed in CBRS, whether it's GAA or PAL, must be registered with one SAS. People might ask, how do they make their money? They charge you to register the devices within their system. Not sure whether that's annual or monthly or whatever, but I'm sure it's a recurring. They haven't shared their financial plans with me, but they're probably based on generating recurring revenues, because to keep the SS up alive, the system's alive and alert and up to speed is going to take continuing investments.
And each of the SASs are going to be sharing each of their registered information with each other on a daily basis, so they're all up to speed as to where everybody is.
Yeah, everybody's got to know where everybody else is. Let me cover leasing a little bit more. Most of you are aware that there's two types of leases, spectrum leases. The spectrum manager lease, where the spectrum manager keeps day-to-day control, and there's a de facto transfer leasing, where you give the power and manage the spectrum to the lessee. So those are still in play. And the PAL licensees may engage in spectrum manager leasing for any bandwidth or duration of time than the 10 license term. I also was fascinated, having visited some of the SASs. You might think, do I have to lease the county? Do I have to lease? No, you could lease a dry cleaner store. I need it to keep track of the thing. You could 50 square feet. I want to use it for that. I want to lease 50 square feet for 3 or 4 years or whatever. I want to lease it for the 50 acres for my refinery. I want to lease it for this educational institution. I want to lease it. There isn't any limit on, other than the county, of course. Of course, you can do multiple deals, but you can engage in leasing in virtually any geography that a PAL's willing to lease it to you under spectrum manager de facto leasing. This is a little bit different. The SASs may also accept and support leasing notifications and arrangements. I can't remember where the quote light touch comes from. Maybe it was in the FCC documents, but it's a less formal process where the leasing is handled and recorded by the SAS. Leasees must pre-certify with the FCC. Obviously, if you lease your spectrum to an entity, you must notify the SASs. You'll see that they keep reappearing. They are keeping track of everything. And the SAS confirms the leasing arrangements. And after all the paperwork's done, whether it's directly through an SAS or whether a spectrum or de facto, and start using the spectrum, just as long as the SAS knows you're there. At this point, I'm going to turn part 3 over to Kyle. It's done a lot of research on equipment and applications that are available today. Kyle?
Thanks, Mark. Yeah, so just to talk about a little bit related to the equipment side of CBRS and what's available and what's out there. The interesting thing and the exciting thing, I think, about this band as compared to other bands that have been auctioned is often when the FCC is auctioning new spectrum, creating a new band, the equipment ecosystem is still ramping up, and through that, it sometimes results in just a very few pieces of equipment ready to go when the band is set to be auctioned. Sometimes that gives those auctions a little bit more of a speculative feel, but in this case, the interesting thing is, because the FCC has been working on this concept and working on this since 2015, the equipment makers have had the opportunity to kind of understand the ecosystem, and they've already started seeding the market, and they've actually already produced devices that are a couple of years that have been ready for a couple of years already. And I know that's kind of a positive, that's kind of a plus to the band as compared to others. I don't know if many of you remember from the late 90s when the LMDS band was auctioned by the FCC, but one of the problems that came about with that was the equipment makers never really came online like the auction buyers thought when they were buying the spectrum. So, and thus it never really got built out in the way the FCC wanted. This case, the CBRS equipment has been already put out into the market. I'll show you here on the first slide. These are equipment handsets that already have CBRS ready to go today, and you will notice that a lot of them are fairly well-known companies with fairly well-known phones that we've probably all seen an ad or two over the years.
All type accepted.
All type accepted. Yep, they're CBS capable right now today. And you'll see some of the big names. You've got the Motorola's and the Apples, and you can see Samsung's already produced quite a number of devices ready to go in that field. Next slide. Regarding base stations antennas, this is by no means a pure and scientifically exhaustive research, but just looking around for equipment makers that have already built and are already selling and advertising CBRS antennas. We've got about 12 to 15 devices that are already out there. Far more are online and coming, or weren't marketed yet, so maybe a search engine wasn't finding them to date. But there's a lot out there. There's equipment that's already ready to transmit and ready to be used in the band. And the next one is here's a couple of laptop pieces of equipment that have CBRS capabilities already in them and already approved and ready to go. And I know more is coming. I know, especially with some of the big equipment makers, those folks are also involved in the involved in CBRS in some make, manner, or form, and will probably be following shortly themselves. And the final equipment slide I wanted to show was probably what I would consider maybe the most interesting for EWA's members, and it kind of helps illustrate the potential and the opportunities that might exist in this band beyond what I would call the consumer side of it, which we saw with the handsets and the large manufacturers in that capacity. These are CBRS capable radio modules that are intended to be put inside of equipment and to assist in make a system wireless and connected anywhere and everywhere. And it has applications to turn lots of devices into wireless devices that could perform lots of tasks, and is really beneficial for what could be the Internet of Things concept that has been touted and conceived of and talked up as it relates to the CBRS band. So these chips like this already exist in the Wi-Fi world, which allow for thermostats and numerous other devices and sensors and items to be wirelessly connected. And this is CBRS capable equipment that can be put into many more things that maybe haven't yet been envisioned. But this could be what an enterprise or an industrial user creates or provides wireless coverage to which will power a multitude of devices that haven't even been conceived of yet through this ecosystem. The applications, the opportunities to conceive of what CBRS was created to be, what the FCC in essence envisioned when they started, in some ways is almost perfectly suited for an enterprise, a business enterprise or a private carrier operator style system. When you take the concept, which we haven't specifically talked about yet in this webinar, but when you take the concept of what this RF ecosystem is going to be, what it's going to look like, you know, the idea of a robust, protected, small area propagation sort of RF environment presents a lot of opportunities for enterprise players, for, you know, private carrier operators, business operators. It's going to have its potential seems capable of being reached through a lot of IoT applications. The concept of sensors in factories and refiners, robotics, all kinds of concepts seem well suited in this band, and it is something the FCC has been really trying to push. They've really wanted to make this an IoT band. As you can also see too, a distinction with CBRS that hasn't always been seen in a lot of auctions is that the band was not specifically set up for commercial carriers, whereas other bands kind of in essence are only available to be auctioned and are kind of only conceived of to be utilized by some of the larger commercial carriers. This is unique, and that is probably most likely because its propagation capability, just the band and what it can do, is a little bit smaller than some of the other bands out there. I had seen that a lot of estimates were that this is going to be about a 5,000 square foot coverage sort of capability, you know, similar to a Wi-Fi router today, somewhere in that range, maybe a little bit more robust. And this is going to be that opportunity, and thus, you know, providing something that doesn't have to fight super hard with existing operators around it, that it's going to have a small propagation, could be beneficial, especially to folks providing an enterprise-oriented or enterprise-focused service. They have also said that if you took away all the environmental factors and gave it a pure line of sight capacity, they're expecting that the line of sight distances may extend beyond 1 mile. Again, I will immediately confess that I am not an engineer, so if somebody wishes to correct that and has the calculation to do so, I will happily defer. Beyond the enterprise operators, the big uses or the big use cases envisioned, commercial carriers will probably likely use this as an extension of cell service. The idea should work well if you're providing coverage to a small town that might be pretty well removed and may not justify the millions it might require for a tower or a large cell site. This sort of concept could be beneficial and could be helpful to meeting those needs. Same thing with cable operators. Cable operators, for the most part, have provided everybody a cable box in the U.S. with the capacity to transmit something wirelessly. CBRS seems well situated for their ecosystem to provide wireless opportunities and offerings through the services they already sell. It wouldn't be fair if we only talked about the positives and didn't possibly show a little bit of the hair that might sit inside this band. This is more just to help people be aware of, even if you've seen a lot of things regarding the promise, there are some ideas that could be a little bit challenging. And one of them is going to be the idea. I've talked to a fair number of engineers that all kind of furrow their brows and kind of talk about the idea of how hard it might end up being to manage the technological components of an SAS if you're moving your transmitter, moving your base station around a lot, that, you know, in essence, keeping the system up to date and communicating could prove to be a challenge. So in some sense, it is going to be conceptually probably going to work best as a fixed sort of concept where your transmitter stays roughly in the same place most of the time. The same thing, going to the next bullet, Navy radars. I have heard stories that those radars tend to paint with a pretty broad brush when they're on and they're nearby, and that's going to be pretty noisy for receivers and devices like that to accommodate it. But the SAS is confident they can manage that, and they've proven it in all their use cases, and thus they have definitely committed to trying to minimize that sort of problem. One issue that has popped up, satellites are going to coexist, and they're going to continue to exist in the upper 20 megahertz of the PAL band that's being auctioned. So it is something that people are going to have to pay attention to when the SAS puts them up in that area. Is they're going to have to be accommodating to whatever the satellites in that area are up to and doing as well. Same thing if you move up to the adjacent C-band, which is just above the CBRS band. There are concerns. The Charter, I think, was the first ones to really catch this. Is the concept, the idea that this is going to be a TDD band is going to require timing, and with timing, you're going to require certain element. Power is going to be a component of helping the timing coexist, shall we say, between the bands. The C band has some power limits, or shall we say, greater power capabilities, and there are some concerns that extra power is going to bleed and cause timing challenges down into the GAA users. That's the secondary users in the CBRS band, who may have a little bit trouble hearing their timing requirements. And so there has been some discussions and some talks at the FCC about trying to make sure there's a way that the timing can be kind of set to coexist between the two bands. Finally, this is just a bit of a late-breaking FCC CBRS news that came out yesterday. WISP providers who currently offer broadband service in the band were set to become GAA secondary users on April 17th. With the current coronavirus challenges that are out there, the FCC granted an extension of time to those providers. WISPA and UTC were the ones that filed on behalf of those users, and granted, we believe it was another 6 months. It hasn't been formally announced, but it was the talk was that those operators are going to be given another 6 months to continue operating with the licensed protected arrangements they have today, which was supposed to end in a month. April 17th. We have this worded correctly, Liz?
Yeah, I mean, WISPA has announced this, that they have declared victory, but I haven't seen anything from the FCC yet, but I assume that they would not have gone public with it unless they had a high confidence level that it was coming soon.
Okay. How many of them are there? Sure.
I don't know. I know there are some members because I've had calls from people recently.
Right. Okay.
I've never looked.
Thank you, Liz. Part 4. Now that you're all, let's do this. I turn you over to the one of the smartest guys I know, Chris Guttman McCabe, for auction participation.
Wow, thanks,
Chris.
Mark. And I promise I won't live up to that. But two quick thoughts before I jump off. Number one, Mark and Robin, I blame you for the weird looks from my family. I thought there was a video component to this, so I showered and I put on a nice dress shirt on top of my shorts and sneakers. And my family look at me like I'm flat out crazy, like the coronavirus has gotten me early in the process.
Easy to say since there is no video.
Yeah, exactly. That's a good point. But I do. I have a button-down dress shirt, and yep, I'm all shaved and showered.
Awesome.
Number two, really serious and more important. As I think everyone has stated, and I think we all need to reflect on this. FCC auction participation is a complicated undertaking. You'll see in a couple slides that we have some thoughts on who you should use as counsel. Not everyone has available someone like Liz to speak with. So to the extent you don't have Liz, there'll be a list of folks with whom Mark and the team have spoken. but I would highly suggest that if you're contemplating participating, that you do reach out to some of these folks who are experts, because again, auctions in general are complicated. This one takes it up a pretty significant notch. So I'll just jump right in. In order to participate in the auction, you need to file, you need to go through a number of processes, but you need to file 2 specific forms. The first key one is this form, FCC Form 175, and a simple Google search will give you examples of what they look like, including through the FCC's auction page. But as part of that, as you complete it, you are required, and the bullets highlight some of this, you're required to disclose information regarding, and this is a quote from the FCC's proceeding, the real party or parties in interest in the applicant or application, and the ownership structure of the applicant, including both direct and indirect ownership of 10% or more. So you're going to need to sort of identify who are the controlling and ownership interests in your company, in your structure. And that's going to be key, determining sort of who is an actual real party of interest. Again, a nod to leaning on some outside counsel. But interestingly for this one as well, you're going to need to identify the counties in which you are interested. So, as Mark referenced at the beginning, you have a choice of 22,631 counties, and that's assuming you only want one license in there. Obviously, it's better than the 74,000 plus that the commission was considering when it was looking at census tracts. So you're going to have to make those selections in your Form 175, and it's important to note that those selections can't be changed after the filing deadline. So the bidding system, the bidding software system, won't accept a bid for a county unless you have selected it in your FCC Form 175. So that's key. The other key form is the FCC Form 159, which involves the upfront payments. And those upfront payments are designed to ensure that people are actually serious when they bid. They are refundable deposits, but they're necessary as part of the process to bid. The minimum, the cost is a penny per megahertz pop, and it's a minimum that ramps up to a minimum of $500 per county. When you select your counties, it is highly likely that there will be a calculator as part of the process that will allow you to determine how much money you need to wire electronically, and that's the only way to get them the money, the upfront payment. You have to make sure, obviously, upfront that you've done your calculations correctly. So obviously it's key to check and double check. You have to make sure that you are prepared and ready to wire. The wire instructions are very specific, but you have to make sure that your bank is ready to wire that money out, because you don't get a second bite at this. It's key to know that the commission, after everything is submitted, gives a window, an opportunity to make very minor corrections. There are very, very few of the applications that generally fall into this. Most are either accepted or dropped. So you want to make sure you get each of these two really sort of spot on corrected. As the third major bullet suggests, you will then receive what are called bidding tokens, sort of your ability, and you'll get two, depending upon how many people you identify as potential bidders, and you can identify up to 3. You will get 2 or 3 of these bidding tokens that allow you to bid on, to participate in the bidding. And as we highlighted up front, the short form window opens on March 26th, but closes on April 9th. The upfront payments are due on May 21st. There's a bidding tutorial on June 11th, and then a mock auction, as Mark had referenced, where you get a chance to sort of tinker around with the software and what it's like to bid on June 22nd, with starting on the 25th. So next slide, if we could. So Obviously, auction begins on 25th. Bidding is anonymous, and what they mean by this is that the FCC will not make public until after the bidding has closed anything that would lend to the process of identifying who bidders are. So none of the license areas that you select, none of your sort of upfront payment amount or your bidding eligibility or anything that would identify someone as a bidder. Goal being to make it so that large and small can generally compete against one another, and that there's, you know, sort of a general open bidding process. It's an ascending clock auction, meaning there's a time period for each round, and the bids move up with each round. And a market will continue to move up until supply and demand are at a match. Now, that being said, the way these types of ascending clock auctions have played out in the past is some people call it a waterfall effect. So you have some larger entities bidding on very sort of focused urban areas, urban cores, high density areas. And as they start to lose out on that, they'll take their eligibility and push it into the second tier areas, which will then cause a cascade down to third tier areas. So even if activity starts to slow down in a non-high density area, that doesn't mean the process is over in that area. The auction only ends at the macro level when sort of all supply and demand are equal. So you can expect in many markets prices will increase each round. The minimum opening bid for a market is double what the cost is for the down payments.
Chris, is the short farms, are they made public by the FCC? That's a question we received.
The short forms are not made public. So who is eligible is, I do not believe the forms themselves are, because they would contain a number of that anonymous bidding information.
Yeah, the forms aren't available.
Okay. Participation, bidding credits. There are three types of bidding credits here that EWA members could or might be eligible for. In addition to these three bidding credits, there are actual three types of caps on those credits. So the first, obviously, is a small bidding credit. You receive a 15% discount, and that's based on annual gross revenues for the previous 3 years below $55 million. The second is for a very small business. It's a 25% credit. Same thing, you're looking at your 3 previous years, but your annual gross revenues have to be below 20. And the third is a 15% rural provider credit, and that's defined sort of specifically what that rural area means. But that cap is 15%, and again, it's fewer than 250,000 subscribers. That is capped at 10 million in total. The other two are capped at 20 and 25 million. Now, there's another cap beyond that, which is focused on ensuring that within a geographic area there is competition, and accordingly there's a 10 million bidding unit cap within a specific PEA, but only the PEAs where the populations are less than 500,000. So you'll have to sort of look and see which you can apply for. You can't combine a small and very small. If you qualify for very small, your max is 25%, not 40 if you combine them both. And then again, there are those maxes of 20, 25, and 10 million for each of the different areas. A couple different ways to participate. Sort of one is, you sort of go it alone. You decide that you are going to participate as an individual entity, and you fill out the forms and you move forward. Obviously, and Mark referenced these, we'll get to the anti-collusion rules, but they kick in upon the filing of the short forms, and There are very, very specific rules as to what can and can't be discussed. Just to give you a personal example of how they are interpreted, I was at CTIA, the Wireless Association, for 14 years. Whenever this quiet period, anti-collusion period, kicked in, we made an announcement on every single call that we held, literally every single call that we held, and it was eerie how quiet it got. There would be zero discussion on any call by any of our members during those quiet periods. So collusion rules generally are taken extremely seriously, and as a result, sort of a lot of spectrum discussions come to a quick and significant.
So, Chris, we have another question. I don't know if this is a Chris or Liz question, but it wants to know, the entity wants to know when the quiet period starts. Is it on March 25th?
Or April 9th.
Or April 9th?
Yeah. It's a good
It's when
question.
you submit the short form, whatever the date is.
Oh, there you go.
It's submission. Yeah.
Yeah.
Everyone generally assumes April 9th, but with Liz, I think it's upon submission.
So
Yeah.
your individual submission date is what triggers it?
Yeah. I think
Yeah.
that's good. That's how I would interpret it.
Yeah.
Okay.
I guess I've never known somebody who filed early.
Me neither. Me neither.
Yeah, what?
Usually it's down to like 11:42.
Yeah,
Exactly.
The
The
Good
moment that I
question.
noticed there was a window was last night to actually file the short form. So to me, there's always been a deadline. There's a second way of participating, and as long as you are not a nationwide provider or interacting with a nationwide provider, the commission does allow for joint bidding consortium. And so one of the ones that I know has been discussed, and I think, Mark, we have Bob Plechky, who's at least listening in this, but one of the ones that we've been knocking around and talking about is this Industrial 5G LLC that Bob Plechky, who is the founder of this and formerly has been at Sonam and in the industry is putting together. Mark, any other thoughts?
Listen, full transparency. We've been, as you said, working with Robert, and we when the shutter goes down, we're done. But we have provided some occupancy data on certain counties that are, I would suspect that everybody would be doing that. I mean, which counties, if I'm going to bid, which counties are optimum? Maybe you know people there, maybe you don't. But, EWA is a reservoir of data when it comes to licensing, and we have that data, and we've shared data with Industrial 5G LLC on those counties. So, and I believe IFG LLC's is going to, well, I suspect that they're going to be at least selling capability, probably not an operator. But to business enterprises and to private carriers, et cetera. This is one, I don't know, I have no idea how many other consortiums may be forming. I suspect that there are several. But Robert learned about EWA. He's been on the board of directors with Sonam, and so it's we obviously have a relationship, and it's been a good one. But when April 9 or March 25 appears, we're case closed. Liz has warned me, and anybody keep quiet, Mark. Chris, if you want, this is the list that we've. Listen, we know EWA, and you probably do, Chris and Liz. We know everybody. We know everybody here.
Yeah, this is a good list. At least to start from, everybody on here. Certainly the firms and the individuals get these processes and are well known within the telecommunications community. I would say all six firms are really well thought of. So Mark and Robin have reached out, and they've all agreed to sort of be part of this list. The same is true, I would argue, about this next slide, the valuation advisors. And not only the valuation advisors, but, there really is some benefit to having some folks, depending upon how actively you may want to participate, sort of game theorists or auction economists. So, the FTI team and the Brattle team with Coleman Bazelon, and there are others, but these are good groups that can help you with valuation and sort of understand the process as well.
Thank you, Chris. Part 5, running out of time, I'm going to cut this short. In case anybody thought that the commission didn't have any rules worrying about anti-collusion, it's in the Communications Act, right off the bat. Section 1, right? Section 1, 2105C in the whole. After you file that short form, you're not to be talking, not to be collaborating, you're not to be comparing, you're not to be talking to anybody. Nationwide provide. You have to be incredibly careful of communications after you file a short form. I'm not going to read all this thing. This is why I want members to get a copy of this in case you're nervous. You have to tell your employees, and you got to tell them, don't talk to anybody. Even if you're sitting there and you got an employee minding their own business and somebody calls them and says, oh, by the way, we're no longer in the auction, you have to report that. I mean, this is a slippery slope to a visit by the Justice Department. Is that right, Liz? If you don't handle this anti-collusion things correctly. You there, Liz? Right. She's on mute. Okay. When in doubt, talk to your counsel. As I think both Chris and Liz said, talk to your counsel. And, some of this is pretty obvious. It's difficult for you to be participating in an auction with more than one application, and board of directors mixing and matching. You just have to be careful. And see, there's one of the points. Hey, we dropped out of the auction. You can't say that. You can't say it to anybody. You just have to, because that's information that's particularly relevant while you're participating in the auction. And you can see, if you receive improper communications, it's required, mandatory, that you report it to the FCC. And since we're full of a lot of helpful websites and things, there's the site to the FCC's guidance on making sure you do not cross with section 12005C. I don't know how we did this. We have 1 minute left or 1 hour. But this is, if you have any questions, there's Chris's email, Kyle, Robin, Marks, and I have all of Liz's stuff memorized. I don't know why we didn't put it on the last page. But do we have any?
I see a question.
Is there a question?
A question just popped up. Does anyone know of any resources for auction simulation tools?
Chris, Kyle, they're out there. Simulation tools, auction simulation tools?
Yeah, no, it's a good question. I'm not aware of any that are sort of publicly available. I know I've spoken recently with some auction economists, game theorist teams that will sell you one, but not one that I've seen and I just haven't really looked, to be honest.
Right.
And I suspect it's not for $49.99.
Right. No, it wasn't. And again, you could get a simple one, but to get one that is keyed auction 105 is sort of what costs money.
I will repeat, this is a daunting auction coming up, but the commission, not that it is entirely, but the commission conducts auctions extremely well. They're not fail-safe. It'd be good to obviously participate at all costs of mock auction, but they're very good at doing these auctions. And if you make a mistake or do something that sort of prompts you that you sure you wanted to bid 10 million when your last bid was 100, right? So I made that up, folks. But They're very good at it. But it's a great question, and if you want, send me an email or get a hold of us, and we'll tell you who you could probably buy it from.
The follow-up question is, do you have a rough estimate as to how much you're talking about?
Oh, the two, Chris or Liz, I don't know. It's probably north of 10,000, but south of 50 maybe.
Yeah, it was. I can specifically say the one that we were talking about was north of 10 and less than 25.
Okay, here you go.
It involved some time with the economist to sort of walk through it. It wasn't just a simple, they didn't just hand you some software.
Yeah, but if Chris is talking to him, that's somebody you probably would want to talk to, right? And if we're talking, because listen, it's not that it's a minefield, but there's really great organizations and some organizations with which we're unfamiliar. It's a nice way of putting it, I guess.
And if you're contemplating spending a lot of money, this would be a very basic thing to help
exactly.
get a feel for what you're doing.
Right.
Meaning something that does cost under $50 might not be that beneficial.
That's not available. Right. No, but Kyle's point's well taken. If you're bringing $5 million, $100 million, $200 million, $1 billion in chips to play in this auction, and what the heck is 20 grand to figure out? Let me see what this tool looks like. Right? It's almost like mandatory. Yeah. Everybody on the call, thank you very much. Please stay safe. These are crazy times, but we love our members. Stay safe. Kyle, Liz, Chris, Robin, Andrea, thank you very much. Everybody take care.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Take care.